Hello and welcome. We are super excited to hear about AccuMatch and the assessment using the NLP. So first off, thank you so much for being here and welcome. Excited to have you. I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can introduce yourself, share with everybody, and then of course I'll stop my screen share so you can start yours. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to everyone's participation and questions. I actually have deliberately not put too many slides because I'd like to have this as interactive as possible. So let me see if I can figure out how to make the technology work properly. Oops. There you go. I did it wrong.
And while you're setting that up, everyone, please, all the way through, that means feel free to put questions in the chat box, in the Q&A. We'll monitor that as we go. And if somebody's really brave and wants to come on live and talk, we can do that. You just got to let me know you want to do that. We are recording this. It will be on our YouTube channel, so an awareness of that.
Yeah.
So at the bottom of your screen, there's a green box that says share screen.
Yep.
And if you click that and then select your PowerPoint, you'll be good.
Yeah, they've changed things a little bit, so it threw me off.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, my name is Nagui Bihelek. I'm the founder and CEO of AccuMatch. You know, this has been quite a journey for us. You know, I think you know, our early research and work around AccuMatch, you know, started in around 2007. I was running a coaching firm back then, and we were seeing a lot of challenges with the coaching styles and clients. And in fact, a lot of the background to this is that I started developing this because we were helping clients with their recruiting process and getting the right people on their team. And what I discovered in that process was actually maybe some of the challenges might have been not the person that we were bringing on board, that maybe it was the client that they're going to work for, which then introduced the whole coaching. How do we use this in coaching? What does it mean? So it was about 10 years of R&D that's gone into this, working with some world leaders in the NLP and meta programs field. It was very exciting to connect with those people. But ultimately, you know, my background, just to give you a little bit of a story there, is originally technology background, but I've always been, you know, from an engineering side, looking at the impact on human behavior. And so behavior for me goes back to high school. So it's been a very interesting journey to now be able to leverage my technology experience with the behavior experience, and through running coaching firms and you know, multiple businesses throughout my career. I won't bore you with all those details. You can probably find those online. So that's just a quick background. And you know, please, you know, if you have questions as we go, Kathy's monitoring the chat box and can take some questions as we go. So, you know, I just want to say congratulations. You know, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is great coaches are constantly learning, you know, we're constantly improving, looking for, you know, what can help me get better at my role, what can help me get better results with my clients. And I think, you know, just, you know, my own story is just constant learning, development, growth. You know, we still haven't stopped. In fact, our panel now of experts that sit on our weekly webinar, which are a coaching session in themselves, it includes master coaches, psychologists, Laurie, and some great coaches from around the world. So it's been a great journey to watch just all the learning that happens through the information that's provided with AccuMatch. I think everyone on this call, correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, has probably experienced some NLP and some meta programs, things like towards and away, is a very common one.
So I know the people that have gone through our program, we do talk about that in our coach training. Some of the people here have not gone through training with us, so I don't know what they know.
All right, so the meta programs are really a way for us to catalog behaviors that stem from our neural pathways, okay? If you like, everything we think for the first time is a conscious behavior. When we repeat it enough times, it becomes unconscious. We develop neural pathways which over time become automatic unconscious behaviors. And those are what the NLP meta program world have been able to catalog and identify through language, through a bit of neuroscience and psychology. I think there's a lot of that in all of these areas. So what we've taken is there's really only been and again, you probably cover what, 8 to 10 of those in training, Kathy?
Yeah, we do 6 pairs of the meta program, so 12 of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So here we're going to cover 49, and it's going to be interesting. You'll see the value and the importance of that. I know sometimes when I first introduce this to people and they go 49, they get freaked out by it. But everybody that goes through that transition eventually realizes the appreciation of the detail and the amount of information that they get, so that they get it very quickly as a result of that. So a quick question, what if I told you that because of AccuMatch, you can now get client results in almost half the time of what is a traditional approach? And we're not really saying, stop your discovery process. What you're going to see is your discovery process becomes a lot more laser focused. And what coaches have often said when they do the training with us is this has exposed things that I didn't think to ask. This is exposed things that I usually would miss in my discovery process. So, thank you, and it's a great feedback to have that information. There are a lot of testimonials on the website. I'm not here to do a testimonial-based case study sales pitch. I'm just going to share lots of technical good information with you. It was designed, as I mentioned earlier, so that it became totally, since a pilot in 2017, everything we've done was to put this in the hands of coaches. The training is designed for coaching. Weekly webinars we run. I run 3 different webinars every week to help coaches interpret and analyze, and we have the panel that I talked about on the calls to help participate with that, so that you get the support that you need ongoing with the program. So what would it mean to you, if through this knowledge and information, that's really what I'm going to try and cover for you today, is give you a little bit of a sense so that you can go away and say, hey, this is actually going to help me with my practice. If I can get better results more quickly with my clients in areas that they don't normally even go into, how would that work for the practice, for the client, for my confidence, because there's a lot of things out there, a lot of training out there that is left up to you to interpret. And so with a tool like this, where you have that supporting information, I think it becomes extremely valuable for the coach. You get the graph. Unlike other systems, we don't send a report to the client. In fact, the report just goes to you as the coach, because we recognize that the interpretation of all this information can only be handled properly through someone who's trained and certified in AccuMatch. And again, I'll show you what that looks like so that you have a good idea of what we're talking about. What happens normally when clients get profiles sent to them, and you've all experienced this, I'm not sure how many people do profiling still. A lot of coaches actually have said to me, we don't do them anymore because of some of these reasons. People get the reports, they're automatically reading through them, they're making judgments, they're trying to find faults with them, they misunderstand them because they're not really trained to be experts at those tools. So that, the intention behind those tools is really to help people not just label themselves, not just become stuck and have excuses to continue to behave the way they are, but to allow them to explore the opportunity. I think, we were talking earlier about neuroplasticity. We know that we have so much ability to change and learn. We're constantly learning since we were born, learning to walk and talk and interact with the world and learn new things, so our ability is just immense. So to get something that puts a label and causes us to say, I am fixed, it just didn't sit right for me. And so that's really what we've been working hard for the past decade to provide this tool and information to recognize that change is possible, and also recognize one really important thing, and that is context can change things. And you probably talk about that in a lot of the training, just because someone's behavior is a specific pattern in a work environment doesn't mean it's the same at home. It doesn't mean it's the same in sports. Our brain has the ability to adjust according to the environment. And there are some great stories of people. Performance reviews is just an amazing one, because we judge people based on their observed behavior in the current role. We don't judge their performance based on what they could be doing in a different role. And because the brain has the ability to adjust to different contexts, they may have that ability, but unless you have something like this that can expose some of that information, we're really only working with observed behavior, okay? So that's an important aspect also that we talk about in the training and certification with AccuMatch. All right, so the purpose then is for us to become more curious, because coaching is a question and conversation process, right? To ask the right question, we need to recognize something, hear something, see something that causes us to be curious. And it's that curiosity that allows us to ask the best questions, which then lead into the conversations which expose their self-awareness so that they can do something about that. When we add the map to this, the questions are supported by a visual representation that they can look at, and it supports their ability to interpret that and make more sense out of it. So through, by not sending the report, but by using it during the coaching, allows them to do that connection. If you like, our physiology, we take in information, as you know, visually, auditory, kinesthetically, and without the map, we're really taking information during the coaching through the engagement, which is usually mostly auditory. Okay, the map brings that visual but almost kinesthetic component to it. Okay, so it adds more power to the speed of the self-awareness that occurs from that. We've got lots of case studies, coaches are starting to share lots of before and after case studies. We're seeing some great shifts within a 12-week program, for example. People are getting greater outcomes. More sustainable outcomes, I think, is the key to it. One of the coaches out of Malaysia did a before and after 12-week program, saw a huge shift with one of the leaders she was working with, and they stopped coaching for a period of time, then followed up in 6 months, I think, after the fact, and did the map again, and they noticed that some of the areas had regressed. Okay, and so it was very easy to spot which areas were sustained and which areas didn't get the focus and repetition that was needed for those things to change. So they re-engaged and worked on those specific areas. Again, creating a much more tangible way of working with clients, in a world which is very intangible. Coaching, as has that element of it has always been a struggle for coaches to, show people the results from a tangible perspective. So, just to recap a little bit, so I can jump in, and I'm sure everybody wants to see this, so we'll get into that. You're getting a lot more detail, a lot more specific, so that the questions that you ask are laser focused on the areas that you need to go deep into that may have been previously missed. The other thing that I'll touch on is combinations. Often with a lot of tools, and even with the meta programs in the past, we tended to look at them in isolation. And with the map, we look at things in combinations as well. What does it mean when this and this and this exist? And so that's probably one of the biggest reasons why we don't send a report, okay? Because everybody can have almost every trait to different extents. And so we measure those extents so that we can ask the question, what does it mean to you, the fact that this and this and that trait show up? And, this and this doesn't tell you much about what I'm going to show you, but we'll go into that.
And what I'm really excited is for them to know that you're actually going to give them the opportunity to take the assessment themselves and debrief it with you. So just a heads up, everybody, you're going to have that opportunity, and that's super cool. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think that's the greatest thing is, to also learn about ourselves in this context. And I think you and I were talking earlier about how I always catch coaches, they forget to map themselves with their client, so that creates blind spots. In fact, that's probably my next slide, so, when we're too much alike, we connect really well, and that's a blind spot sometimes. So we need to be able to identify those blind spots. Exposing clients' limiting beliefs. We have lots of great coaching questions that we can ask. This again creates an additional curiosity that we can constantly take them back to that. In fact, our webinar last night, there was a really interesting scenario where, the client was coming up with some pushback situations. And so the question of, okay, you realize this is what's happening. So what's with this pushback that I'm feeling? What do you stand to lose here becomes the question. So that was really interesting. All right, so, let me jump into the system. Maybe this is a good point if there were any questions on, the history or the information that I've shared so far, and taking while I change screens and jump into the software.
Okay, and in the meantime, a couple of people have already put in the chat that they're excited to hear they're going to be able to take the assessment themselves. So do you want me to share those links now or later? I know I'm going to put them in the email out to everyone. Do you want me to throw them up?
Just let me change screens here quick. There we go.
Are you okay if I give them the links to access the assessment and scheduling the debrief with you?
Yeah, look, you can start sharing. We'll share it now and later again. So yeah.
Okay. So everyone, I've put that in the chat box. You're welcome to copy it from there. And then, of course, afterwards, when I send the email out to all of you who are here, it will include those links again, so you'll have access.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know if everyone's been to your site, but, they can get to, the page also. So this is where you can schedule, access the training, etc. But I think doing your own assessment is a really important step, and that's not on that page. So be sure to get that link from Kathy so that we can schedule some one-on-one time. Obviously, it's going to get really busy for me with everybody wanting to do that. So we'll be able to hopefully manage that through the coming weeks. All right, enough of that. Let me jump in. So this is our back-end software that you will have access to manage your client assessments. Everything you do is secure and private to your own clients. So, I'm going to access a whole bunch of different things here. I've got a lot of reports in the system. The management of sending out the links, like the one that Kathy has shared with you, is done through the back end, and you can manage your own companies, your own clients, and send out the coupons, manage the coupons, etc. All the departments and everything is managed through the back end by yourself. Nobody else can access any of your client information. Okay. So privacy is very important. So I'm just going to maybe pick, let's see if I can pick some people that are, I like to just show you some of the ease of use of the software so you can jump around from different areas. There is a client report as well as a report that you would get. I don't know if this will allow me to do that. Can you see that screen, Kathy, with the PDF?
So I can see this screen where, like, it says John Doe and some of the other names. So it looks like you've set up some examples in here for us to look at.
So you're not seeing a PDF with multiple pages?
Oh, you know what? I think the way Zoom works, if you stop your share and then select the PDF to share, then we'll see it.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we have to jump back and forth these days, right?
Yeah, or if you literally just select to share whatever is on your desktop, then it'll show us whatever's on your desktop. Just close your email first.
I think they took that away. I couldn't find it, so I'll take another look in a sec. So this would be the report that you would get. Okay, so it's a fairly detailed report. There are multiple maps that are provided for you. Okay, the and I'm going to jump back again. So let me go back here. Why isn't that screen available? So I'm just going to have to jump back and forth. Sorry about that, guys. So I'm here. I'm going to, we've just got some dummy names in here. Tom Jones, John Doe, right? So very quickly you get to see a map of the client, okay? Now the green area is a benchmark. Now in this case, I am using just general population in the system, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about benchmarks in a moment. What this allows me to see very quickly is where this person is inside or outside the benchmark. And that tells me just how quickly they will adjust with just general, and this is work context at the moment, general population when they are in the workplace. There's going to be some areas that are outside that, and this becomes the curiosity questions. So in the context of the role, and this was a researcher, is this behavior important? You know, as a researcher, are you waiting for information or are you initiating lots of tasks? And so I would think that this is probably a good fit, but I need to ask that question of the client as opposed to using my own judgment in that, right? The amount of reflection that's taking place around the role is also important. You know, the convincer channel of doing as a researcher, you know, sounds really interesting. Again, you know, I would ask the question, you know, how much of what you are doing in your role requires you to be physically actively doing things? Is it visual? Is it auditory? What's your convincer channel? And how quickly do you accept information? So all of this is captured through this. And I'll go into more detail on the PDFs in a minute. So what else can I do with this? Well, let's say I want to map, you know, these two so I can see how they interact together. And all of a sudden, wow, you know, you can see the differences between the two individuals, okay? And there are some things that really stand out. So if this was a manager or a colleague and teammate, then you could start to ask questions to them and sharing the information about how their brain responds to different situations at work. So, you know, for one of these, you know, it's high internal, knowing the answers within themselves without really looking for external input, right? Whereas the other person needs that external input. So what does that do to the dynamics of that relationship in the workplace? So that becomes a really insightful piece of information that you can get from that. Obviously, you can map more people. The more you map, the busier, obviously, that map is going to get. And that's why we created the benchmark abilities. So with the benchmark, some of the concepts, I'll share with you some examples here. We had a corporate client that had two significant sized departments, and they were both doing the same thing, but one was doing really well and the other one wasn't. And so they wanted to benchmark the two to see the pattern of both the manager and the team, okay? Because now we're talking about a department where the dynamics and the culture of the group is probably influenced by the manager, right? And we wanted to look at both of those and compare them so that we could see, okay, where are the managers different? What sort of things are happening as a result of their style of management? And what's happened to the group in their benchmarking, their dynamics, if you like, and how that works for them. Why this group is doing really well and the other one is not doing as well. The other thing is, culture can be mapped. We're doing an exercise at the moment where we're launching the ability to compare benchmarks visually, but also with multiple languages, okay? Because the system is now in 5 languages and we're adding some more. So we have Spanish, Malaysian, Indonesian, Hebrew. There's one more, I'm sure. Then we're adding Chinese, Vietnamese, French. So there's a number of languages. And what we want to do with the benchmark is to be able to look at, say, coaches in different cultures. What's happening? I keep hearing the fact that in China, our culture is different and our coaching style is a little bit different. I'm going, I'm not really sure about that because I haven't seen a change in the benchmark from when we did it in North America versus when we've gone international. That general benchmark that I showed you a few minutes ago hasn't changed from where it was before going international to now being international. So these are all the things that we'll be able to do. But the other side of this is you can do them yourself. You have the ability right within the system to customize benchmarks and create your own benchmarks, okay? So that's a really powerful thing. I've got a few benchmarks that I use here. Coming back to, mapping yourself for the client, this is an interesting thing, and we always recommend that coaches do that. As I mentioned before, sometimes this creates blind spots, and blind spots could be where we are similar, okay? So it's not just, if you look at the second graph here, there is a lot of similarity in this area here. And so if I'm not aware of that, I might be hearing what I want to hear as opposed to asking questions about those specific areas. So, affiliation is about building relationships and valuing relationships compared to being in control and achievement oriented. And in this case, John Doe and myself are very similar in that, and I need to be able to ask the question to John Doe and say, hey, in your role, is affiliation important, do you think? Right? And so we can get into the discovery process of how that applies to them as well, okay? So these are, just some of the things that you can do here. I'm just gonna pause for a minute while I just take a quick swig of water before my voice dries out and see if there's any questions at this stage.
Okay, so one question that came in is, what are your thoughts on the validity of self-report data versus behavioral observations?
Great question. So because the brain is so, the plasticity side of things that we've talked about earlier, things can change. So when you observe something that doesn't match the map, in fact, that's what we were doing when we were doing the recruiting with this tool. It was very important for us to have a list of questions during the recruiting process to listen and observe, and also have the map alongside of that. And as you get better at all the interpretation, this will become natural for you to be able to identify where discrepancies might be happening. And discrepancies often happen because you'll go through the assessment. It's very hard for people to figure out what we're looking for. Excuse me. Um, so they don't know the unconscious patterns that we are looking for. So this will give you the ability to actually look at that and identify the different areas that are going on in a relationship. And I'm just looking for that PDF again, just to share that with you. Did that answer the question, or I kind of lost track of that?
And we've got another question while I'm giving them a chance to respond to make sure it answered their question. The other one says, I'm curious about how this works within a one-on-one session versus a group or business setting. Is this an assessment you ask all your personal clients to do in order to help determine if you're a good fit for each other?
Yeah, it's a, how do I answer this? I think it's important for you to map yourself with your prospective clients before you start. I suggest people do this as an onboarding process. In fact, right now I'm documenting a step-by-step process of how to use this in starting your engagement. So, if you're interested in that kind of conversation, I'd love your input. But the idea is we do this prior to the engagement so that we can look at it. And as you said earlier, Kathy, you have the ability to look at the bios. Well, now we have the ability to also look at the map and see where there might be some big challenges. Some of the areas that are quite different can sometimes cause coaches to, not be aware that they're inside their own head, if you like, right? And this becomes a tool to allow you to pick the right match. Now, when I first launched this, we were doing it with a master coach out of New Zealand. And one of the things I recognized very quickly is he kept doing maps, and I found a pattern with a lot of his clients that was showing up as he engages very similar style of people. So was he attracting that, or was he finding those people attractive and therefore he was better at convincing them, right? Becomes the question. So yes, there are some interesting patterns. Other questions? I'll keep going a little bit here. So when we look at this, and let me just see what.
Yeah, if I may, a follow-up question to that, and of course there's two sides to that, because what I'm thinking in my mind is one of the things we talk about as coaches is doing an assessment when it's going to benefit the client. And how is this going to benefit it? So we want to be careful about having, hey, I do this with everyone, because coaching really is to flex with the client. I can also hear the other side of the coin, that both end piece of it, where there's value in really matching that. The other question that came in is, when you look at cost, working with individuals versus corporate setting, how does this assessment measure to other programs or assessments, is what I'm getting. I think it boils down to, how much does the assessment cost?
Yeah, and I'll cover that a little bit later on.
Okay.
Yep. The first question, yeah, so when I ran our coaching firm, one of the frustrations that I had was coaches coming back and saying, this person is not coachable, right? And I'm going, hang on a sec, you mean you don't know how to coach them, right? And so we need to, I agree, we need to have the ability to be able to coach just about anybody, right? So using the map to eliminate people, that's not what this is intended for. A great coach over the years becomes aware of their own behavior patterns through the map, and by looking at their clients and mapping themselves with their client, they can also be a chameleon in almost every type of client situation. So I think that was a really good question. I think that was the question that was being asked, right?
Yeah, and then you mentioned you'll get to the cost piece, so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So here's someone, you don't know the context of this person's role. So if you look at it just in isolation, there's a lot of spikes, and you could very easily say, well, what's going on with this person? And that's bringing our own judgment into this. And we don't want to bring our judgment into this. We want this to be us being neutral and asking the client the questions. So if I said, this person is, let's say this person's an engineer, okay? And we look at some of the points on the graph, and they're high self, high internal, they initiate very quickly, they are high options, which means they like to solve problems, they don't really like to work procedures. Now we're starting to see things that are causing you to be curious and say, okay, what type of engineering role are you doing that causes you to be more a problem solver and initiating, as opposed to someone who follows a procedure and sticks to the same thing? Okay. Now, if that was a role, if we were hiring for, we have a big bid for an organization that wants to use this for recruiting. And so we get the role description, and the role description, let's say it's a bank, and they're hiring for a bank teller, okay? Now, if I look at the bank teller role, I really don't want a bank teller that's very creative with our money, okay? So they really should be high procedural. So these are the things that you get to learn through the training and certification of this. So there is an element of also looking at this and comparing it to the role, because what we're looking for is identifying blind spots or limiting beliefs, right? So what are your beliefs about your role as a teller, And we had actually a situation early on where someone was hiring a bookkeeper. And I said, you know what, don't hire this person. They're high affiliation, they like people, they don't really stick to procedures, etc. But the client loved that person. So she connected really well with him, only to call us 3 months later and say, it's not working. So this accuracy actually becomes really powerful in those instances. Now, if I said this person is a business owner, an entrepreneur, might give us a different context to that. So if he's leading a team, high contrary means he speaks up when he doesn't agree. He doesn't just go with compliance consensus with the group. He doesn't need the group to just agree. So they will speak up when they need to. This person is also has a high need to be in control, in charge. So now we get into a conversation of, wow, what impact is that having on your team? Okay, there's this level of wanting to be in control and wanting to read the reports with very low affiliation. What impact is that having on your team? How is that serving you? Is that serving you well? Do you feel like that's working for you? Or is this something that you think is actually a blind spot for you that you need to work on? And I had a client actually similar to that, and we needed to reduce the quality control because everybody came to fear him, right? They didn't argue with him, they didn't bring up their opinions. And so it created an environment where the whole team was high consensus and he was the only one that was high contrary. Interesting situation.
Yeah. In the meantime, another question came in related to something you just said. and they asked, said, in my experience, it has been frowned upon to use these types of assessments to make hiring decisions. What are your thoughts about bias in interpreting this data for hiring decisions?
I agree, and yet we've seen a lot of value and accuracy in how this has worked compared to other reports. The challenge with the other reports, and I don't want to say anything negative about the other reports, they have some great value in being simple and easy to interpret and use. The thing that they do is they project an assessment based on algorithms that have been created back in the 1920s, 1950s. And so a lot of those tend to, when you read them, and I'm sure you've been there yourself, when you read them, you interpret things in them that could apply to a lot of different people. So what we found in recruiting, we used to use DISC, we tried Profile XD, Myers-Briggs, have used a lot of the tools, and the accuracy was 50-50. You know, so you might as well just not use it because gut instinct is just as accurate as 50-50. So when we started doing this, the accuracy went sky high through the roof. In fact, we're talking to an organization right now that wants to do blind recruiting, so no one-on-one interviews because of the biases that occur in a one-on-one interview. In fact, so what they're finding is the interviewers and the managers are often biased by their own expectations, their own filters, their own judgments, and so forth. So that created a bigger problem for them, and they wanted to be gender neutral process and not biased by the personal biases that show up. And this is what we're testing with them at the moment to find out just how well this works. And my experience, you know, and yes, I am biased, is this is quite accurate. Very good. All right, so where did I get you? I'm looking at the time. I think I need to probably get back. So I think yeah, that's probably given you a good flavor of the system and the software. The assessment survey is online. You send it out and they do a survey, which, you know, most of you, I hope, will take up the opportunity to do that. And now I should get back to my slides, if I can find where my slides are.
You're like I am, 85 things open on your computer at the same time.
All right, so I'm just going to cancel out of there because it wasn't showing the page because it was still in full screen. Share screen. All right. Yay. Play. All right, so the training program is online. There is 38 lessons. They're short and easy to absorb, and the reason for that is we want you to not only learn them, but go out and practice them. So, you know, if you spread that over a couple of weeks, it's really important to start to get to know those. Part of the certification process is we give you 2 assessments as part of the tool, of the training, excuse me, and 3 months access to our webinars. You know, we want people to at least attend half of the 12 webinars in the 6 month, because listening to other coaches debrief the maps and talk about what questions they're asking their clients, what's being discovered, you know, having that psychology expertise on board to also help you understand the neural pathways that may be underlying behind these is an important part of making sure that the coaches are well armed to interpret these without biases, without the filters. So, going back to that previous question, the idea of the map is not to necessarily use it as an end-all judgment. In fact, in recruiting, we have two forms we use. We use a natural language questionnaire, and we use the online survey, and we're looking for discrepancies, and we have experts that interpret those so that we're identifying discrepancies in an interview process. So we want to use the map to create curiosity to ask the question, as opposed to making it a fixed judgment about someone. Okay, people can justify just about anything, and so we need to identify whether this is an unconscious pattern or a conscious response. Okay, which part of their brain are they using during the coaching session? Okay. There are several ways that you can get additional assessments afterwards. We have a subscription. We found this to be the most attractive for people. It gives them 10 assessments per month. It's 120 per year. It's a 12-month commitment. And what we found is this was our way of supporting coaches with their marketing initiative. In order to get clients, coaches were constantly asking for more assessments. And so that allowed the price to really come down to $14.14 if you're paying for a year in advance. And this is with your discount that you get with the Center for Coaching certification. So it's a really great way for you to access that. You can buy them individually, and I do have some more information on that. Just wrapping up a little bit here. You have an opportunity to do this. You have a few time slots allocated to this, so please do your assessment and book a time slot. Here are some questions that I had prepared, unless more questions come up. The question, one of the common questions is, how long does the foundation training take? So there's 8 hours of online and at least 6 out of the 12 sessions. So, it's up to 20 hours of webinar and training. You need to debrief with one of our panelists or with the group. 2 of the AccuMatches that we provide, so that we can help you to make sure that you reach the standard and the level that we want to have out there. It's very important to us that this is actually in the right hands, being used the right way. Okay. The last thing we want is for people to just start sending out reports and causing this to be misinterpreted and misjudged and misused out there. Okay. So certification, there is a certificate at the end of that. Other questions? How do coaches use those 10 assessments per month? It's usually, as I explained, it's a marketing tool for them. This is a very unique product, as you've seen. And what we've heard over and over again is coaches were going to HR managers and leaders and so forth and saying, why don't you do this and let me show you what we can discover about you and your team. And once they've done that and booked a debrief, just like I'm doing with yourselves, the clients, more than 90% of the cases, converted into coaching. Okay. We have one coach that runs workshops all the time, and this is the focus of his workshops. And so he fills the room with 20, 30 people, and he gives away the 10 assessments in the workshop as an incentive. So, he's giving away basically, we charge $300 for an assessment and a debrief, as you can see on the bottom there. And so he's giving away a lot of value during those sessions. You don't have to get onto the subscription straight away. If you want to just buy the assessments, we have different offerings. So you can just buy one at a time. And, they're not the cheapest out there. It's $125. If you buy it in a bundle of 10, it's $75 each. But if you go on the subscription, you're paying $14 to $16 an assessment. So what we found is by the time somebody buys 2 bundles, they're paid for a year, might as well jump onto the subscription. Last slide here. What support is available? Weekly coaching sessions. As I said, I have 3 running at the moment. There's 2 on Monday.
Yeah, and I think we're looking at the slide before the one you're talking about.
Oh, what support is available? Is that?
Oh, I see. Okay, my apologies. Now we're there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's 3 running, 2 on Monday, 1 our morning, which is noon your time, and then 6 p.m. your time, and then there is a Thursday one which runs a little bit later, 7 p.m. Eastern. So as we find there are more groups coming on board, what I like to do is get the newbies together, because the conversations we have with the more experienced coaches are really not always map related, but they're behavior related. So they're really interesting coaching sessions about, the last few sessions with the advanced group right now are around what's going on with the COVID-19 situation. What behavior patterns are you seeing? Which ones are creating challenges out there and things like that? So really interesting conversations. Everything is recorded. So we've probably got about 200 different recordings, and they're cataloged, so they're easy to find. If you want to go back through our recordings on a specific behavior, you just go to our catalog, pick that behavior. It'll give you a list that's cataloged. They're short 10 to 20 minute snippets from the whole recording. So we spend a lot of time making sure that you have access to a repository of tools to access it without having to wait to ask us those questions. Okay.
And, excuse me, I realize we're almost out of time.
Yep.
A couple more questions. One, so if I'm hearing you right, what makes this more accurate is the lens of meta patterns and NLP, even though it's self-rated. Is that correct?
Yeah, this takes a good 30 minutes to do. There is 52 questions, and we ask the questions in many different ways so that our algorithm can actually get very specific information. So it's not a continuum where someone is this or that. It's actually, you can have both traits sometimes showing up side by side. So that information is really useful, because when you have them side by side like that, is there a conflict going on inside that person they can't decide? And so that becomes another conversation to have. Yeah.
Okay. And you answered the question, so it takes 30 minutes to take the assessment. And then the other question is there validity data available on the assessment?
Yes, there is some things that are built in there to check that and to basically throw people off the scent a little bit. And we have some information that we have in the back end that if the question came about, we can verify the validity as well. We're constantly working on that. Right now, some of the stuff that's coming down the line, we're introducing some machine language learning and some artificial intelligence. And we're working with some very high-end people to look at a lot of this interpretation and those questions that you're asking about the validity for recruiting, for instance. Well, natural language, machine learning, and things like that allow us to discover some things that we can only do as human beings, and we're trying to convert that into some advanced tools that will help support that.
Yeah,
That's coming down the line.
Excellent, excellent. And we have used our time. Thank you so much. This was just fascinating. We're getting other comments in. Very interesting presentation. Looking forward to hearing feedback in terms of all of you taking the assessment and doing the debrief. So let me know what you think. Send me an email after you do that and have your debrief. So I'll be curious to hear from you. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thank you, Kathy, and thanks everyone. Really appreciate it. Yeah. Take care.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.